After Brendan Allen's main event win against RDR, the UFC's middleweight division remains wide open. You have the champion Khamzat Chimaev, who still doesn't have a next title challenger. There's actually only one fighter ranked in the top 15 that has a fight scheduled, and that is number 14 Marvin Vettori, who is fighting outside the rankings. So I thought it'd be fun to make a video kind of playing matchmaker for the middleweight division, make a fight for every single ranked fighter, and then obviously the champion. And that's where we're going to start it off here. Who should Khamzat Chimaev fight next? I went with Nassourdine Imavov. Now, I feel like over the last couple of months, there were two big time matchups at 185. You had the UFC Paris main event between Imavov and Borralho, and then you had the Vancouver main event originally between Anthony Fluffy Hernandez and RDR. Then, Fluffy has to pull out. You have Brendan Allen stepping in on short notice, getting the win there. And it kind of felt like whichever fighter had the more impressive performance, or if there was one truly elite standout win, that they could get the next opportunity. Although we didn't see Imavov have that type of big time win, I still think he's the most deserving option here. He's on a 5-fight win streak. His last 3 wins have been against Caio, Borralho, Israel Adesanya, and Brendan Allen. So I do just think he's the most deserving guy. Shout out to Brendan Allen, had a great performance. I just felt like when you were looking at the Fluffy RDR matchup, I think both of those dudes were probably one big win away from getting a title shot. I just didn't feel the same way about Brendan Allen. So Khamzat Chimaev taking on Nassourdine Imavov, that is what I would do next. Then the guy who just picked up the win in the main event, we have Brendan Allen, who I think should be taking on Dricus du Plessis. According to the UFC rankings, this is number 1 DDP taking on number 5 Brendan Allen. And I think this is a one-sided number 1 contender fight. If Brendan Allen can get past DDP, the former champion, I do think he would be deserving of a title shot. These two have gone back and forth on social media. It's clear they don't really like each other. Brendan Allen coming off of back-to-back wins. And then I want to see DDP get tested in the grappling department. When you look at his, kind of run out in the UFC, he's had one real grappling test, and that was against Derek Brunson. And he won the fight, but he still did kind of struggle in the grappling exchanges. And then we see the Khamzat Chimaev fight, and Khamzat just embarrassed him, pretty much controlled him for the entire matchup. So for him to get another opportunity, especially if Khamzat remains the champion, I think he's going to need to show that he has made some real improvements. Now, Brendan Allen is not comparable to Khamzat Chimaev as a grappler, but he is going to test DDP there, and that is something I'm interested in seeing. So Brendan Allen versus DDP would be a fight I'd make. Then another fight that could serve as a one-sided number 1 contender matchup, Sean Strickland taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. This is number 3 versus number 4, according to the UFC rankings. And for Sean Strickland, I do think it's time to fight down. He's not even fighting like crazy down, right? Number 3, fighting one spot back. But he's coming off that second loss to DDP. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez has been on a roll, 8-fight win streak, was supposed to be in that main event against RDR. I think that looked like a great matchup on paper. I'm sure Anthony Hernandez is kind of kicking himself for not being able to make that card. Not that it's his fault, but you just look at the game plan that Brendan Allen rolled out there. It seems like Anthony Hernandez could have done that potentially to an even higher level. So I feel like he would have done really well in that matchup against RDR. He's coming off of back-to-back really solid wins against Brendan Allen and then Roman Dolidze. So I think, one more big win here, especially against Sean Strickland, could definitely serve as a number 1 contender matchup for him. And if he did pick up a big win, potentially a finish against Sean Strickland, I do think he would be due for a title opportunity. Then kind of getting a little farther away from the title, we have Israel Adesanya. And at this point in his career, I'd honestly prefer that he retire. I feel like his time really being in the title picture, being super relevant, actually competing for championships is probably over. And so for someone like that who is at the top for so long, I don't want to see them take unnecessary damage, kind of float around in the top 15. But if he wants to fight, you're obviously going to give him a fight. And so I'm going to go with the Israel Adesanya Paulo Costa rematch. I think this is a situation where Izzy does have to fight down in the rankings. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. He's lost 4 of his last 5, but he's probably going to be looking for fun, entertaining matchups. I don't think he's going to want to be taking on the young, hungry grapplers of the weight class. So you put him in a striker versus striker matchup against Paulo Costa. Now, I do think you could argue that Costa does not deserve this opportunity. I'd agree with you. He's only on a one-fight win streak. That was a decision win against Roman Kopylov, but he's a big name. He's a fun fighter. This is a striker versus striker matchup, and I think both guys would be interested at this point. Then a fight that I think is, potentially more relevant for the title picture, Caio Borralho taking on Reinier de Ridder. According to the UFC rankings, this is number 7 versus number 8. These were both guys that had a lot of momentum before their last fights, both lost in main events, looked like they could be climbing to a potential title shot, and they are now both coming off of their first losses within the UFC. I don't think either of these guys really need to fight way back in the rankings. I think they're certainly still in the mix. So you put them up against each other. Whoever gets the win, now they're set up for another big time opportunity. Then the loser, all right, maybe it's time to fight down back-to-back losses. But I think both of these guys are still players in this weight class, both very, very relevant. Then, once again, kind of moving away from the relevant options, Robert Whittaker, I'd honestly prefer to see him also retire. I just think even just comparing the MMA math of his performance versus RDR compared to Brendan Allen, he's just not one of the elites in this division anymore. So I'm actually going to book him against someone who I actually also don't want to see at 185 in Michael Venum Page. I just think the best version of MVP is down at 170, so I don't love him sticking around at 185. But if both of these guys want fights in this weight class, I think this could make sense. They're both big names, both, best suited for striker versus striker matchups. For Whittaker, like I said, kind of a tough run, back-to-back losses to Khamzat Chimaev and RDR. It's kind of crazy. He's only 34 years old. Some fighters at 34, especially in the heavier weight classes, are entering their prime. He is a pretty old 34 when it comes to MMA, though. 24 UFC fights. He's been in a lot of 5-rounders. He's had his fair share of wars. I want to say those Yoel Romero wars were 2017, 2018, a while back. He's still fighting dudes in the top 10. I think this matchup does keep him relevant at 185 if that's what he wants. And then for MVP, he is 2-0 at 185, wins against Jared Cannonier and Shara Magomedov. I do just think he's better suited for 170, but like I said, this could be an interesting matchup. And honestly, I think MVP probably would be the betting favorite against Robert Whittaker, especially if it was just a 3-rounder. Then a couple more matchups here towards the back end of the top 15. I have Joe Pyfer taking on Jared Cannonier. This is number 15, who is due for a step up in competition, versus number 11. Joe Pyfer's on a 3-fight win streak. He's 6-1 in the UFC. Like I said, I do think he should fight up. Jared Cannonier makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, he is 1-3 in his last 4, and this will actually be his 5th straight fight where he will be defending his spot in the rankings. Cannonier, another guy where I wouldn't hate it if he kind of walked away, but the Joe Pyfer fight does seem just a very realistic matchup with where these guys are at in their careers. And then the final matchup, we have Roman Dolidze, who is currently ranked number 12. Personally, I think he should be fighting outside the rankings. I'm going to have him taking on the winner of Ikram Aliskerov and the Iron Turtle. So Roman had won 3 straight before the fluffy loss, just the dominant fluffy loss. But the win streak was kind of weird. It was Marvin Vettori, then it was Holland, or I'm going in reverse order, but you had the win against Marvin Vettori, Holland, who was up at 185, and then Anthony Smith, which was that short notice fight he took up at 205. Looking at these other two, I think both with a win against the other could, definitely deserve a shot in the top 15. Ikram is 3-1 in the UFC. All of his wins have been by round 1 knockout. His only UFC loss is to Robert Whittaker, and then his only other pro loss was against Khamzat Chimaev. So really strong strength of schedule. And then for the Iron Turtle here, he's won 6 of his last 7. His only loss was a very competitive, somewhat controversial split decision. So Roman should be fighting down, potentially outside of the rankings. I think the Ikram Park winner makes a lot of sense. I did consider putting Dolidze up against Edmund Shabazian. I think Edmund Shabazian does deserve a crack at the top 15. But from what I saw, they're fairly close training partners. So I don't know if that's actually a fight they would take, but I'll throw that out there also. But that is going to wrap it up for matchmaking every single ranked middleweight. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree, disagree with all of these matchups? Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you guys in the next one.